Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
The general principles of management were propounded by Henry Foyle. It was first published as Administrative Industrial et General in 1961. It was complementary to Taylor's work. It proposed 14 principles of management. Division of work, authority and responsibility, discipline, unity of command, unity of direction, subordination of individual interest to general interest, remuneration of personnel, centralization, scalar chain, order, equity, stability of tenure of personnel, initiative, spirit de corps, and even today these 14 principles constitute a large component of what would be the basics of management. And even though the general management theory and general management principles may not be the latest, their contribution to understanding management thought is central. Division of work is rooted on a very simple principle: every work cannot be done by everyone because it requires different skills. This is not the same thing as specialization. Please get this very clear. By doing 3 courses, you don't become a specialist in finance. You have just done 3 more courses, period. So you should be careful in using everyday language for scientific expressions. You may call it a specialization in everyday language. Scientifically, it is not a specialization. But it does recognize that in an organization, if you are to work together, you will need different types of skills for different types of tasks, and therefore different types of training. Therefore, it is the principle of general management. Authority and responsibility. Nothing will work until there is a line of command. Somebody must have the authority to give valid orders, which is why later on you will find that there is this caption of order. Order there means a principal organization which creates orderliness, which creates some kind of a semblance of a system, which creates a relationship between one unit and another. That is what is the meaning of order. I have run down these 3 areas. I do not have to explain each one of them because several of them are self-evident. But unity of command is a theory which is now variously questioned. But when Henry Foyle talked of it, it meant that you can't have 2 leaders. We live in an era today where very often there is duality of reporting pattern. You have one superior who is your administrative superior, and there is another superior who is your referent superior, to whom you go for specialized knowledge. The administrative superior grants you your leave. He is administratively responsible for your conduct. But your referent superior will give you the answer to the problems which you have at hand, especially the technical problems. It has a unity of direction. You can't have different people in the organization pulling in different directions. Subordination of individuals' interest to general interest. This is a very common principle of organization management. The collective interest is always larger than the individual interest. That's the principle. The collective interest being what is for the common good. Now, this again goes back to the social contractualist theory. Remember, Rousseau talked of general will. General will meaning what is the collective will of a people, and what leads a group is the general will. General will need not be, as I have already explained to you elsewhere, an additive function. Or in the Indian ethos, this is known as samashti, loka kalyana, janahita, or what was coined as a slogan, bahujan hitaya, bahujan sukhaya. What is to the common good? Utilitarians talked of it. Harold Lasky talked of the greatest good of the greatest number, whatever that slogan means. It is one of those grand slogans which owes its success as much to its ambiguity and confusion as to its good use of words. What is the greatest good of its greatest number? It cannot be analyzed. But the slogan worked. It immortalized Harold Lasky. Again, that person is great whom everyone calls great. You don't have to establish your greatness by a count. You may be a great person by count, nobody believes you are great. A reinforcement of what I call the general will theory, or what can be called the general interest. Who is a scholar? Whom everyone says is a scholar. Has anyone conducted an examination? Has anyone weighed his knowledge? No, but it is generally believed he's a great scholar. He becomes a great scholar. So there is a lot to be said for group identity. Organizations run on the principle of group identity. That's the larger principle which I am trying to establish with you. And after all, each one needs to make a living, so there must be some remuneration. Where do I earn my food? Where do I buy? How do I buy my clothes? Now remember, there are theorists even around that. There are three thinkers which have gone into the making of the modern world. Not that these are the only three thinkers which have gone into the making of the modern world, but the three important thinkers which I think everyone should be broadly aware of are Freud, Adler, and Marx. Now you would have heard of them. If you haven't, you should have. Now each one of them propounded a theory. Freud took the view that all relationships are determined by gender relationships of attraction and repulsion. And attraction and repulsion are not necessarily a factor of opposite gender. People of the same gender can also be attracted or repelled by each other. Something which was later on established through simple scientific tests which prove that from each of our bodies certain energy emanates. You can use different words for it. Certain rays emanate, certain energy emanates, certain waves go out, which is why, if you are sensitive enough, of course, if you are the type which vegetates, all this will not make sense. But then, as I said, management is meant for only the best. You are sitting in your room, somebody enters the room, and you feel automatically attracted towards him to strike a conversation. Another person enters the room and you say, oh my God, now what is he doing here? You don't even know that person. There is something about the bodily waves which are matching or which are not matching. So Freud propounded the theory that all relationships are rooted in physical attraction and repulsion. Marx propounded the theory that all relationships are rooted in financial transactions. I don't know whether Marx ever visited India or not, but he seemed to understand India very well. I mean, if you develop a relationship with someone, you are secretly asking, is he going to get me money or is he not going to get me money? If he's going to get me money, good friends. If he's not going to get me money, bad friends. Forget about physical interaction. How does it matter? So long as the rokad comes in, great. For those of you who don't know what is rokad, it is cash. Cash which makes noise, rokad, coins. So Freud said, it's absolute nonsense. You can be attracted towards anything or detracted towards anything, but what builds a relationship is, as Roderigo is told in Othello by Iago, put money in thy pocket. You want this woman to love you, put money in thy pocket. Now, if you haven't read Othello, of course, you would have a clue of what I am talking about. But then, as I said, I don't talk to innocents. Now, I can't tell you what is the story of Othello. Then I'll be telling you Shakespeare. Then you would be wanting to know, is Shakespeare in the Indian Parliament or is he outside the Indian Parliament? How do I talk to innocents abroad? Marx said, money determines all relationships. Whom will you marry? The girl which will get you the money. Which boy will you marry? Who has the best salary. For the rest, good luck, they are all the same anyhow. How does it matter? Now, if the caricature doesn't work, your life experience will tell you. And I am not saying this, Marx is saying this. And Marx became very famous. And then there was Mr. Adler. Mr. Adler said, forget money, forget gender relationship, all this is utter nonsense, the powerful works. Clearly, Adler had read Tulsidas, because Tulsidas says in Ramcharitmanas, Samarath ke nahi dos gosai. If you are powerful, then you can't commit any wrong. Of course, Tulsidas is taking a pot shot at it. And he says that's the law of the world. The powerful will get away with anything. It is the weak who will be punished. In fact, I was reading a columnist the other day and he made a brilliant suggestion. We should pass a law that if your financial worth is more than 1,000 crores, you will get automatic bill. Because anyone who is worth more than 1,000 crores seems to be getting bill. Now, this is not my opinion. But the point that I am trying to prove is the booties go to the powerful. So said Adler. So if you are powerful, the rest falls. They will come and give you your degree at home. Admission, job, bungalow, promotion, even a private jet. Now, who wants to be attracted or detracted? Once you have a private jet, then the beautiful man or the woman would enter that jet anyhow. So, get power. So said Adler. Now, none of them were friends to me. None of them visited me at my home. I don't know, and quite frankly, it's not my job to know. My job is to tell you these are the three key theories of relationships. Remember, we are, as it were, in the purve of theories. Like everything else, each theory has a kernel of truth. Sorry, not C-O-L-E-N-E-L, but K-E-R-N-E-L. Because even your spelling must be as good as you are. You won't know the difference between one kernel and another. But here I am not to teach you spelling either. By kernel, I mean essence of truth. All these three things determine the way human relationships go. Power, money, gender. And at the end of it, all of them work in unison or work in exclusion. I don't know. When you are talking of general theories of management, then when you talk of remuneration of the personnel, what you are saying is you must remunerate the person for his efforts, otherwise what shall he eat? That is the principle. I have recommended to anyone who is studying management or who is interested in management to have extensive reading. Not that I think many people would seriously follow what I am saying, but you can't be a good practitioner of management without wide reading habits. And I don't have the time to get into that kind of a discussion here, but let me tell you, if you want to understand the basic driving forces of human nature, read the immortal writing of Bertolt Brecht, The Good Woman of St. Juan. You will understand a lot about human nature which you would have never understood through all your experiments in life or even attending classes. Literature is a great source of learning of management if you know how to interpret it. Then they talk of centralization, they talk of the scalar chain, they talk of order, equity. Equity, very popular word these days. In fact, it's like Om Namah Swaha. Don't ever deliver a speech in India without talking of the word equity. Whatever you say must lead to equity. And so long as you are propagating equity, you are on the right side. Slogans become fashionable. There was a time in this country when socialism was very fashionable, about 20 years ago. Now socialism has become a dirty word. So like fashion models, like Miss Indias, like political figures, each one has its day. Words also have their day. So the current reigning queen is equity. Everything is equity. It should be financial equity. It should be social equity. It should be political equity. I talk of class equity. And if you want to become famous by writing something, talk of bottom, talk of top, talk of revolution, talk of abolishment of poverty. Become famous. These are recipes. One great outcome of theory is it shows you the shortcut to success. And I am deadly serious in this. Yes, I may have a light-hearted way of quipping through this, because those of you who are listening to this, imagine your plight of 1 hour of listening to this drone. Good Lord, how do you ever survive beats me. But the long and short of it is, each theory is supposed to show an experiential way of success. And in the ultimate analysis, you don't believe anything which anyone tells you anyhow. You will have to experiment it on your own. So good luck. Find out how far the word equity goes, but start using it. At least you will be one up. So certain words have gone out of fashion, certain words have come into fashion. They will also go out of fashion. Nothing will change anyhow. No, somebody will say, that's being skeptical. No, I can't be skeptical. But the fact is, management is a search of the leverage principles which cause a change. So it's not about skepticism, but it is about trying to understand how skepticism can be fought. And it is trying to show what is the way forward. Just as I propounded to you, forget about transforming others. No one will get transformed. Change yourself. Just as I said, the real intervention is management of self. If you can do that, you believe in what you say you do. Otherwise, you are delivering a lecture. Not such a bad thing after all. You can make a living out of a lecture. The trouble with lectures is they are as good as the people listening to it. If you are yawning through it, it's no good. Now, to take the conversation forward beyond general principles of management, let's look at the merits and demerits. This sort of thing has universal support, but it has no empirical evidence. Just as I said, you can find as much empirical evidence for Adler as for Marx, as for Freud. God knows where the truth is. When you are in love, Freud appears very important. If your dad is getting you married, Adler becomes very important. If your cousins are getting you married, Marx becomes very important. After all, how much is a dowry at the end of it? Damn it, anyhow you'll be fighting with your wife or your husband. Oversimplification, yes. But as I said, there is no empirical evidence to prove which of these theories is better than the other. Each one believes the theory which explains his present predicament the best. Let me repeat that. Each one believes the theory which explains his current predicament the best. If you have been betrayed by the person whom you love, then you say, this world is useless. Nobody can be trusted. If you are about to get married, then you say, this world is beautiful. You have to be in love to realize how beautiful it is. If suddenly you have hit the jackpot, got a job in that great mega bonanza which everyone is getting rich with, you say, forget about everything, it is money. You know, there is a great statement, I will not say from which part of the India it comes, but it goes something like this. God made man. Man made money. And money made everything. Now, it depends upon what you are going through. You will believe just that. What does learning and scholarship do? It raises you beyond your current experience and puts you on a platform of maturity so that you understand what life is in its fullness and not because of one experience. And that's what I'm trying to target for you, showing you everything so that you learn that all these are cards on the table, as it were. And you don't oversimplify life. Then there are behavioral theories of organization management, and this is a great bedlam. Everyone has a theory on everyone else. I'll give you a classical example. I know of a person who was rejected 3 times for a professorship. So the person was very distraught. And if you get to be as old as I am, and if you have seen as much of the world as I have, several people believe I have some answers to their problems. So this person was in a conversation with me and was telling me how tired this person is about repeated rejections from professorships. I said, look, you come from a public system. The public system has a panel of experts. Any expert will be appointed out of the panel. This panel is always in the public domain. So next time you go to face the interview, your expert will be one amongst the panels. So why don't you get the name of the members of this panel, which I told you is in the public domain, and send it to each one of them a copy of your current research and get their feedback. You will learn what they have got, the experts have got to say, and your research will become better. Listen to the reply. No. I have done many things in life, sir, but this is one thing which I have not done. I said, which is why I am asking you to do it. The person said, no. I will not do it at all. I said, why? It's unethical. I said, where does ethics come into all this? No. And that chant of na evokes humor in me even today. Let me give you the breakup of the components. Your experts will come from a panel. The public, the list of the experts is in the public domain, nothing secret about it. You have been rejected a number of times, you want to make the grade. How does it hurt if you send a paper that you have written to all of them for their comments so that you can learn where you go wrong? What's unethical about it? It's fashionable to talk of cases in behavior. I cited to you a case which says very simply, at the end of it, it is the individual idiosyncrasies of the person which becomes a theory. It has nothing to do with research. I will not tell you further details about this person because I am not manufacturing or conjuring up this story. This person, the person had jumped a contract with a straight face. It will always constantly talk of ethics. So you are drawn about the opposite. If you have violated something, you keep talking about it. That's behavior. I'll tell you another story of behavior. There was this movie being shot, and in the happier days when the Connaught Place was not such a rubble, the shooting was taking place there. And the hero, presumably, like all film heroes, must have been a tall, strapping chikna, hunk, as the expression goes. And this hunk was walking down. And of course, you can't beat up the film's hero. So the director got fed up with it, and he said, let's make it a live shot. Because each time there would be a fisticuff, he wanted a few shots to be exchanged before the hero actually demolished the person who was trying to fight him, as a hero is supposed to do. So the director decided to make it a live shot, which meant the hero was supposed to walk down the curve of the Connaught Place and accost the first couple coming down the road. So the hero set out, the film shooting began, the reels began to roll, and as it happened, the first person which the hero met as coming down the circle of the Connaught Place was a couple actually. So the hero stood aside and said, excuse me, sir, is that your wife? So he turned around and said, yes, she happens to be my wife, but what is it to you? He said, sir, if you don't mind, as you were coming down the Connaught Place, I wondered how a handsome, charming, distinguished looking person like you could be married to such a rich, ugly, decrepit person. And he was ready for the husband to lunge at him. So he was ready to take on the shot. And you know what the husband did? The husband turned around to his wife and said, you see, darling, now people on the road are saying exactly what I have said to you all these years. So the shot was again spoiled. Now, I wasn't there, as I often say after an anecdote, so I don't know how the director retrieved the feeling, but behavioral theories are known not to prove anything. The distinguishing characteristic of a behavioral theory is its non-predictive validity. Each one is different, which is why a lot of engineers have a lot of difficulties with behavioral sciences. They want with behavior to have predictive validity. Now, you can't customize human beings on an ISI mark. It's not nature of material. So whatever I tell you under behavioral theories of organization management, you should take it with a pinch of salt. Some of them work, some of them not. And at the end of the day, they are only so good as far as they go. Elton Mayo's Hawthorne experiment. The contribution in terms of human relations and motivation theory. Elton Mayo examined productivity and work conditions. Mayo studied the variables affecting productivity, conducted Hawthorne studies at Western Electric Hawthorne Works in Chicago, and he held elimination experiments which said that you better the conditions, the productivity would improve. So relay assembly test groups, interviewing programs, the bank wiring observation room. The experiments, conclusions from Eltobian's theory. Work is a group activity. Now, did you need an experiment to prove that? You know, my good friend Dandekar, one of the first generation economists of independent India who left a lasting mark. I know he didn't come from Harvard, therefore it's not fashionable to remember Dandekar anymore. It's so much simpler to remember an expert from one of the prestigious seats of learning elsewhere. But Dandekar is a person worth remembering with a lot of respect. He narrated to me a story of a university in this city, the details of which are not relevant. But then he was talking of experiments which got me more curious about this university experiment. He says, no, that story I will not tell you, but I'll tell you the first study which was carried out for the planning processes. I said, what was it, sir? He said, the study was to study scientifically what is the basic need of an Indian, because that was supposed to be the cornerstone of the planning process. And you know what they came up after 2 years of study, after crores of rupees had been spent on analyzing the basic needs of an Indian? Anybody to guess here? Absolutely. They discovered after 2 years of work with investment of over crores of rupees, several crores, the basic need of an Indian was clean drinking water and nutritious food. And Dandekar laughed and he laughed and he laughed and he turned around to me and said, tell me, do you need research to prove that? I said, sir, that's the scientific method. He said, one day you will find your way to the Planning Commission. I'd like to believe he was joking. But the truth is, do you have to prove that work is a group activity? But Elton Mayo is celebrated. Nobody talks of Manoj Kumar, but in every organizational behavior class, you will be told there is a hierarchy of needs according to Maslow. Now, of course, it's more fashionable to quote Maslow than to quote Manoj Kumar when they say the same thing. Maslow talks of a hierarchy of needs. Food, clothing, shelter, prestige, that's Maslow's hierarchy. But it sounds so much better when you say according to Mr. Maslow than according to Manoj Kumar. So please remember this if you want to go ahead in life. Name a person as an authority which sounds good to name. And I'm talking practical management to you. After all, what sells is what people buy. If people are willing to buy Maslow and not Manoj Kumar, then you better start selling Maslow. But for heaven's sake, be conscious of what you are selling. If you want to get the derivatives for a behavioral principle, it is this: there is no substitute for your own common sense, of your judgment. Remember, we are talking of a framework of analysis. Don't be misled by my light-hearted narration of anecdotes or quips. There is a serious point being made there. You cannot interpret a behavioral theory unless you have the analytical tools of interpreting it and applying it. That's the point I'm trying to make. And you can forget all my anecdotes, you can forget all my references, it's not relevant. Therefore, let's get back to Elton Mayo. He established that work is a group activity. He established that social world of an adult is primarily patterned around a work activity. And yes, there is something to be said about establishing even the obvious truths on a scientific basis. The need for recognition, security, and a sense of belonging is more important in determining workers' morale and productivity than physical conditions under which he works. Now, this is extremely important. The driving forces are recognition, security, and a sense of belonging. I'll give you two laws from what I referred in another session as Gautam's self-laws. You want to make friends with someone, start praising him. You are so brilliant. As you rightly said, you are correct. Your principles are so good. It's a pleasure to be with you. If you have an enemy, he'll get converted to a friend. And if you want to make enemies with someone, start trying to improve him. Come on, yaar, eat properly. This is no way. You eat junk food all the time. What is this? You want to see movies? Can't you study during that period? 4 movies in a day, you get out of one Audi, you go into another Audi, and you know what an Audi is. And if you are innocent, well, I'm using the word Audi as the slang popularly used for auditorium in PVR. What is a PVR? At least this audience would know that. What is a PVR? You see, the general knowledge is so good there. So you go from one Audi to another Audi, tell him, don't do that. You say, what is this? Can't you attend classes regularly and go to the classes prepared? What is this? What kind of dresses do you wear? It doesn't even look decent. Even if he's your best friend, he'll turn an enemy. And these two principles do not have even a 10% exception. Agreement is the biggest bond. Correction is the biggest repellent. That's a behavioral science theory. Guaranteed success. If you want to break up with someone, and if you want to make friends with someone. The important thing to realize is people are driven more by emotions than any other dimension. You keep saying nice things and you deny them the material advantages, even if you are offering them your life yourself with material advantages, but you are wanting them to improve, you will make enemies. It's a very simple law of life, and Elton Mayo recognized that. Therefore, the contribution of Elton Mayo is significant. Elton Mayo is to be taken seriously, and that is the relevance of behavioral theories. Informal groups within the work plants exercise strong social control over the work habits and attitudes of individual workers, a very important principle. The change from one established society in the home to an adaptive society at work plant resulting from the use of new techniques tends continually to disrupt the social organization of the work plant and the industry generally. Now, a lot of work has been done on this in management principle. It is known to be the correlation between culture of the job, spelt OF, and culture of the job, OFF. And very often the culture of the job percolates into the culture of the job. And very many serious students have looked into this issue. And since I do wish you to walk the path of knowledge, learning, I might even say scholarship, and that's the real purpose of undergoing any such education. There is another thesis, and I've referred to certain dissertations in the past in these sessions in IIT library, which has made a serious study of the culture of the public sector managers in India between their creativity of the job and creativity of the job. I personally think it's a seminal study. How does the creativity practiced by a person outside his work environment gets transferred into the creativity on the job, and how much of it can be carried? It is important to recognize that research is an important enabling situation of any learning. And all research need not be abstract. The fundamentals of research begin with observation. And I put it to you that to be a good manager, you need to be a person with outstanding observations. And my emphasis on the word observation is perhaps as important as my emphasis on the word outstanding. And if you don't even know what's happening around you, forget about being a manager. World will not come to an end if you are not a manager. The next theory I would like to talk to you about is that of Rennesis-Likart, whose research on human behavior is very often referred to. Rennesis-Likart talked of the industrial situation. We don't have the time to get into now, but a very important outcome of the theory and the researches of Rennesis-Likart was creating systems within organizations and emphasizing that systems must be internally and mutually consistent with each other. And even if you don't understand the principle here and now, it's important that you be exposed to it. And this is what Rennesis-Likart said. The communication system of an organization must be consistent with the reward and punishment system of the organization. And he further established that the reward and punishment system of an organization must be consistent with the control systems of an organization. And he converted the analysis of an organization into different systems, and he argued with a lot of conviction that unless they are aligned, the organization will not be productive. And I want you to be conscious that of the fact that whereas there are limitations of behavioral theories, there is a certain seminality of behavioral theories which is essential for the making of any practitioner of management. Therefore, Rennesis-Likart's behavior research on industrial situation. He contends the form of an organization that will make the greatest use of human capacity is highly effective group works linked together in an overlapping pattern by other similar work groups. I have just explained that to you. So, Rennesis-Likart's systems are a major contribution to understanding organizational functioning from a behavioral point of view. In other words, you can't have a loose control system and a tight communication system. It won't work. You can't have a strict punishment system and a loose authority pattern. It won't work. The organization will collapse under its own contradictions. There are 4 different management styles. You can call them systems. I have just referred them to you. And he has given a name to the styles. And he calls them the exploitative, which is the authoritative system, the benevolent, the authoritative system, the consultative system, and the participative group system. The Rennesis-Likart's effective management talked of modern principles of motivation. It talked of employees' perspective. It talked of group linkages for organizations. It talked of supportive relationships in a group. If you put it all together, you get an understanding of how Rennesis-Likart can be used for understanding the different systems of management to pick what will work and to pick what will not work. Ultimately, it is neither Elton Mayo which is right, nor Relis's Leichhardt which provides all solutions, but then the exploitative, the benevolent, the consultative system and the participative group systems as defined here go on to talk of the employee's perspective, group linkages and supportive relationships in a group, and ultimately this is what management rides to produce results. Then there is the Chris Argyris maturity immaturity theory. It establishes that descriptive and multidimensional developmental processes operate in any organization. It has to be examined to determine the effect of management practices on individual behavior. And it has been noticed that there are 7 basic changes in mature people, and then I will go to explain this to you. So, Chris Argyris basically says managers are supposed to be mature. If you are immature, forget about management. The 7 basic changes are: tendency to develop a state of being, to be active as an adult, independent as an adult, the act to behave differently as an adult, be able to develop a long run perspective, able to have control over oneself, able to move to superior positions. And this is the continuum he talks about. Passive to active, dependence to independence, behave in a few ways, capable of behaving in many ways, erratic shallow interests, deeper and strong interests, short time perspective, long term perspective, subordinate position, equal or superordinate position, lack of awareness of self to awareness and control over self. He says the objective is to move from being an immature person to being a mature person. And in this diagram, you have the descriptions outlined, and in each case you can mark the spectrum as you do it on a scale, and you can almost measure where you are on that spectrum of immaturity to maturity. Which is where I said ultimately it is self judgment, it is self management, and investment in yourself that matters. You are obliging no one by taking care of your intellectual growth. You are doing nobody else a good turn by investing in your own self. Because the world will belong to you in whatever limited manner it can by a whole set of indicators which several behavioral scientists have been talking about, and of which maturity is a very important principle. I hope you will be able to see the range of from being passive to active. You don't sit there being a helpless object of events taking place around you. You become an active player. And there are a lot of poems and sayings on how you can determine your own future. Obviously, maturity requires recognizing the broad band in which you can and the broad band in which you can't. But the broad band available for intervention is so large that it can prove your making and unmaking, and that's what you have to understand as a manager. Chris Argyris talked of the impact of the theory, and he talked of widespread worker apathy, design of formal organizations, leadership style and management control. And out of this, Chris Argyris imparted to organization management a scientific basis which endures till today. Now, by any means. People like Elton Mayo, or people like Chris Argyris, or all the others which I have named as I have gone through several schools of thought and organization theories, are not an exhaustive list. And before I am through with this topic and this treatment of organization theories and schools of thought which provide a framework for organizational analysis, I want you to know of some of the other names. And each one of them has made his contribution in a limited way. One is Vroom. Vroom has talked of the expectancy theory. After all, life is a set of expectations. Like many other things, you expect things out of life. When does a relationship turn sour? Be it with your parents, be it with your cousins, be it with your brother, be it with your sister, be it with your girlfriend, boyfriend, teacher, bus driver, whoever, when the other person does not meet your expectations. So the truth is, all relationships are a network of expectations. And when you respond to somebody's expectations, you are great. And when you don't respond to somebody's expectations, you are not great. The trouble, however, is that your expectations may not be very mature. I am tempted to tell you another anecdote, which perhaps those of you who don't have work experience may not be able to relate to. But remember, I maintain that management is best understood by those people who have a work experience. There was this little bird flying south during winter to get to better climate. As it happened, it got caught in a blizzard, and it was snowing. The little bird collapsed under the weight of the snow and got buried and lay there for a full day. It happened to be a huge farmland, and there was no way anybody would come and dig it out while shoveling the snow. But as chance had it, a bull passed that way, and it dropped something where the bird lay. And because of the warmth of that dropping, the snow began to melt, and the bird began to feel very good. So it started to chirp, and as it chirped, there was a wolf passing that way. It gobbled up the little bird. What is the moral of the story? All disasters are not necessarily endless. All those who shit on you don't necessarily mean you bad. And all those who take advantage of you don't necessarily give you life. If you remember the story, you will remember Vroom's expectancy theory. I know it is very normal to have expectancy, but it is disastrous to be only expectancy driven. Long after you have forgotten anything to do with organization theory and schools of thought as a framework of analysis of organization management, these anecdotes will come back to you, and who knows, some of these theories will linger with you. I don't want to discuss Vroom's expectancy theory beyond this, but I have an obligation to list the basic components. It is an alternative to the content theory. It provides with a very comprehensible, valid and useful approach to understanding motivation. Used to be a favorite theory around the 70s, when everyone was desperate to understand organizational behavior. And unfortunately, through the mid 70s and the early 80s, organization management wasn't such a fashionable discipline to read. When people realized you can't moderate behavior, but you can moderate organizations, and therefore emerged organization theory and practice. And suddenly it became very important to understand job designs, organization design, information flows, decision centers, and it was no longer fashionable to do attitudinal surveys of the motivation theory, because the truth is you can't motivate anyone if that person doesn't want to be motivated. A disastrous thing to say. Does me out of many consultancies, but unfortunately I can't lie to generate a consultancy. To motivate someone, the person whom you want to motivate must be willing to be motivated, and that can't be ensured. There are limits to what you can do to motivate anyone. However, Vroom's expectancy theory provided you a framework for understanding motivation, and I need to place it on the table. I have an obligation to explain it to you. It assumes that behavior results from the conscious choices amongst alternative whose purpose is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Read this very carefully, understand this clearly. Behavior results from the conscious choices among alternatives whose purpose is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Vroom's expectancy theory talked of other things. Individuals have different set of goals and can be motivated if they believe in positive correlation between the efforts and performance. He is right, provided you are talking of his goals. His goal may not be to study at all. He is going to inherit an empire. Why must he study? He will earn enough money to hire the best trained advisors. No reason for him to study. Alas, he doesn't realize even to select from advice, he must be literate enough to know which advice will work and which advice will not. However, this is not understood by people who don't have the right motivation, which leads to a very commonplace statement: you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. Favorable performance will result in a desired award. Reward will satisfy an important need. This is a great motivation. A reward will satisfy an important need. Sometimes you may give an award assuming that that level will never be reached, and then that person reaches that level, and then you have to give that reward. As many of you would be knowing, I have 2 children who did reasonably well in their lives. Their anecdotes are not relevant. But to the second one I said, if you top in the university, I'll take you to Singapore. And she actually did top. Now you can imagine the expense I had to incur. So in your personal lives, don't promise rewards which you don't mean unless you really think it's outside the domain of all probability. Even a report probability does come true. Now if you think I'm being flippant about it, I am not. I'm making a deadly serious statement, and the serious statement is the following: rewards must be meaningful and correlated to the actual ability to incur those rewards. Can you incur those rewards? First question. 2, if you can incur those rewards, is that effort worth it? 3, at the end of the day, anything which is reward driven and only reward driven, please notice my emphasis. It can be many other things and reward driven, then it's fine. But if it is only reward driven, it doesn't last. Remember, behavior is like water. It settles down to its natural level. You can't pump it to artificial levels. Let nature take its course. Push it up as much as you can. Accept what will not happen. Systems theory has talked of it very wisely about all this when they have started talking of limits to growth. So at the end of the day, there isn't such a big difference between behavioral theory and systems theory. All these warfares, which a lot of academics love indulging in, come out of lack of understanding of each other's discipline. If you understand each other's discipline, at the end of the day, what you say as a behavioral theorist and as a system theorist do converge. Desire to satisfy the need is strong enough to make the effort worthwhile. Vroom's expectancy theory had three basic beliefs: valence, expectancy, instrumentality. Valence means the relative ratios. If I do this, this is what I get. If you do that, this is what I get. Now, how do you establish a relationship? Expectancy, instrumentality. Vroom suggests that an employee's beliefs about expectancy, instrumentality and valence interact psychologically to create a force such that employee acts in a manner that brings pleasure and avoids pain. While I am talking of all this, and I was talking of Marx, and I was talking of maturity, and I was talking of Chris Iris, I am reminded of a definition by Marx of maturity. He says, the ability to go through pleasure and pain without a sense of guilt is maturity. It's a brilliant statement. You may or may not agree with it. The ability to go through pleasure and pain without a sense of guilt is maturity. Just as you are enjoying a 7-course dinner, somebody walks up to you and says, do you know the number of people who are starving outside? I should not be thinking. It has caused in you a sense of guilt. Now look, even if you abandoned that food, no one who is starving is going to be saved. You are going to join the ranks. Now, I am not saying don't do good to the needy. No, I am not saying that. That is catching the bull by the tail. A very widely held sport, catching the bull by the tail. While talking of behavioral theory, I have to mention it. The art of misunderstanding is perfected by some people to a fine art. Whatever you say, they will misunderstand. In such situations, don't even try to make them understand. Just keep quiet. But there are different definitions in behavioral sciences. Choose what suits the situation best. Note my emphasis. Choose what suits the situation best. This can be calculated via the formula motivation, valence, expectancy. Bring in instrumentality because that's the way the delivery mechanism will take place. Vroom's expectancy theory explains job satisfaction, one's occupational choice, like the likelihood of staying in a job and the effort one might expend in the work. We shall stop there for now, and we shall take up Maslow's theory of motivation next.